The breaking point. Marcus Thompson stood motionless in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, his calloused hand gripping the wooden frame. The room was exactly as Emma had left it 3 months ago, her small pink bed still unmade, stuffed animals scattered across the floor, and crayon drawings taped crookedly on the walls. Each picture showed the same thing: stick figures of a father and daughter holding hands, with big smiles on their faces. The setting sun cast long shadows through the window, making the empty room feel even more lonely. Marcus limped inside, his injured leg dragging slightly behind him. The doctors said he was healing well, but the pain from his construction site accident still haunted him every day. Still, the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. He carefully sat down on Emma's bed, picking up her favorite teddy bear, the one he had bought her for her 7th birthday just last year. The bear's fur was matted from countless hugs, and its ribbon was slightly frayed, but Emma had loved it more than any of her other toys. Now it sat here, alone, just like him. "I'm so sorry, Princess," he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. The words echoed off the bare walls, a reminder of how quiet the house had become since the custody hearing. Marcus remembered that day clearly. He had put on his only suit, the one that didn't quite fit anymore, and tried to look confident as he walked into the courthouse. His ex-wife Sarah sat on the other side, looking polished and professional in her business attire. Her lawyer had a stack of papers ready: medical bills Marcus couldn't pay, missed child support payments, and documentation of his injury that made him unfit to care for a child. His own lawyer, the cheapest he could find, barely spoke during the hearing. Marcus wanted to stand up and tell the judge about how he read Emma bedtime stories every night, how he never missed a parent-teacher conference despite his injury, how he would take any job he could find to support his daughter. But the words got stuck in his throat as he watched his world crumble around him. The judge's decision was quick and devastating: full custody to Sarah, with Marcus's visitation rights suspended until he could prove financial stability and physical recovery. In just 15 minutes, he lost the right to see his own daughter. Now, 3 months later, Marcus worked as many hours as his injury would allow at Johnson's grocery store. The pay wasn't much, just minimum wage for stocking shelves and helping customers carry their bags. But Mr. Johnson was kind enough to hire him despite his limp, and every dollar he earned went into a special account. Emma's Fund, he called it, saving up for the day he could afford a good lawyer and fight for his rights as a father. His small apartment felt enormous without Emma's laughter filling it. No more morning rushes to get ready for school, no more weekend pancake breakfasts, no more impromptu dance parties in the living room. The silence was deafening. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his photos. He scrolled through countless pictures of Emma, her first day of 2nd grade, the two of them at the park, her missing tooth smile at her last birthday party. His thumb hovered over Sarah's number. He had tried calling dozens of times in the past months, but she either didn't answer or kept the conversation short, never letting him speak to Emma. A tear rolled down his cheek as he looked at Emma's school picture from last year. She had insisted on wearing her hair in 2 braids, just like her best friend Jenny. Her smile was bright and carefree, unaware of the struggles that would tear her family apart just months later. Standing up slowly, Marcus walked to Emma's desk and straightened her coloring books. He wouldn't give up. He couldn't. Every extra shift, every penny saved, every physical therapy session was a step closer to seeing his daughter again. The custody hearing might have labeled him an unfit father, but he would prove them wrong. As the room grew darker with the setting sun, Marcus made a promise to the empty room and to himself. "I'll find a way back to you, Emma. Daddy's not going anywhere." The last memory. The morning sun was barely rising when Marcus Thompson started his daily routine. He moved slowly through his small apartment, his injured leg stiff from the cold night. The physical therapist had told him to do his exercises first thing in the morning, but today, like most days, he found himself drawn to the window instead. From here, he could see the school bus stop where he used to wait with Emma every morning. His 8-year-old daughter would always insist on arriving 5 minutes early, afraid she might miss the bus. Now, he watched other parents with their children, their morning goodbyes a painful reminder of what he had lost. The memory of their last day together played in his mind like a movie he couldn't turn off. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Emma didn't know it would be their final time together. She had been wearing her favorite blue dress with white butterflies, her brown hair tied up in a messy ponytail that he had tried his best to fix that morning. Sarah had arrived early to pick up Emma, her new car gleaming in the driveway. "Daddy, I don't want to go yet," Emma had said, clinging to his leg. "We didn't finish our puzzle." The 500-piece puzzle of a unicorn still lay unfinished on the coffee table, waiting for a return that never came. Marcus remembered how Sarah had hurried Emma along, checking her expensive watch repeatedly. "The judge made his decision, Marcus," she had said coldly. "We need to stick to it." As they walked to the car, Emma had turned back one last time, her small face pressed against the window, tears streaming down her cheeks as they drove away. That was 3 months ago. Now, Marcus's phone showed 57 unanswered calls to Sarah's number. The few times she did pick up, her answers were always the same. "She's busy," or "she's doing homework," or "now isn't a good time." At work, Marcus tried to stay busy. Mr. Johnson, his boss at the grocery store, had started giving him more hours as his leg improved. Today, he was arranging cans in aisle 3 when he noticed a little girl about Emma's age helping her mother shop. She had the same kind of light-up sneakers Emma loved to wear. "Daddy, look. They twinkle when I jump." Emma's voice echoed in his memory. He had saved for 2 months to buy her those shoes, working extra shifts despite his injury. The joy on her face when she opened the box had made every painful hour worth it. During his lunch break, Marcus sat in the store's break room and opened his wallet. Behind his ID, he kept a small school photo of Emma. In it, she was missing her front tooth and grinning widely, proud of the gap in her smile. He had been there when that tooth fell out, helping her wiggle it loose and telling her stories about the tooth fairy. The physical therapy bills piled up on his kitchen table at home, next to the legal papers he could barely understand. His new lawyer, a kind woman named Linda Peters, had agreed to take reduced payments, but the costs still felt overwhelming. Every spare dollar went into a special account labeled court fees, but the numbers grew so slowly it felt hopeless. That evening, as Marcus heated up a microwave dinner, his phone buzzed. His heart leaped, hoping it might be Sarah, but it was just a text from his sister Marie. "Thinking of you, big brother. Don't give up." She had been his biggest supporter, lending him money when she could and offering her couch when he had to sell most of his furniture to pay bills. Before bed, Marcus did his leg exercises, gritting his teeth through the pain. The doctor said he was making good progress, but it didn't feel fast enough. He needed to be better, to be stronger, to prove to the court that he could take care of Emma again. As he lay in bed that night, Marcus could hear children playing in the apartment complex's playground outside his window. A little girl's laughter floated up through the darkness, so similar to Emma's that his heart ached. He reached for his phone one more time, typing out a message to Sarah. "Please, just let me hear her voice for 5 minutes." The message showed as delivered, but like all the others before it, there was no reply. Marcus closed his eyes, holding on to hope that tomorrow might be different, that tomorrow might be the day he would get to hug his daughter again. An unexpected encounter. The fluorescent lights of Johnson's grocery store buzzed overhead as Marcus Thompson restocked the cereal boxes on aisle 4. His leg was hurting less today, and Mr. Johnson had noticed his improved speed, giving him an approving nod during the morning shift change. It was a small victory, but Marcus had learned to appreciate those. The evening crowd was starting to trickle in, tired office workers grabbing quick dinners, mothers with shopping lists, elderly couples moving slowly with their carts. Marcus knew most of them by now, 4 months into his job. Mrs. Chen always asked for help reaching the top shelf, and Mr. Peterson liked his groceries packed with cold items together. The store's radio played soft music as Marcus checked his inventory list. He had just opened a new box of cornflakes when he heard the automatic doors slide open. He didn't look up immediately, not until he heard a voice that made his heart stop. "Mommy, can we get the rainbow cereal, please?" Marcus knew that voice. He had heard it every day for 8 years, had read bedtime stories with it, had kissed away its tears. His hands trembled as he slowly turned toward the sound. There she was, Emma. His little girl stood at the end of the aisle, holding Sarah's hand. She wore a new purple jacket he had never seen before, and her hair was longer than he remembered, now reaching past her shoulders. She looked taller. Had she grown so much in just 4 months? Sarah hadn't noticed him yet, busy checking something on her phone. Marcus stayed frozen, half hidden behind the cereal display. He should move. He knew he should walk away, but his feet wouldn't listen. He couldn't take his eyes off Emma. Then it happened. Emma turned. scanning the shelves for her favorite cereal, and her eyes met his. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Her eyes widened in recognition, and the biggest smile spread across her face, the same smile he saw every night in his dreams. Daddy. The word echoed through the store as Emma pulled away from Sarah's hand. Daddy, it's you. Sarah's head snapped up, her phone forgotten. Emma. No, she called, but Emma was already running down the aisle toward Marcus. Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Emma was just a few feet away when Sarah caught up, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. Emma, we're leaving, Sarah said firmly, but Emma struggled against her grip. But Mommy, it's Daddy. Please, I want to talk to Daddy. Tears were forming in Emma's eyes now, and the sight of them felt like a knife in Marcus's chest. I'm just working, Sarah, Marcus managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. I won't cause any trouble. Please, just let me say hello. Sarah's face was a mix of emotions, anger, concern, and something else Marcus couldn't quite read. She pulled Emma closer to her side. This isn't the time or place, Marcus. There are legal proceedings in place for a reason. Daddy, I miss you, Emma called out as Sarah began leading her away. I got an A in math, and I learned to ride my bike without training wheels. Daddy. Marcus watched helplessly as Sarah hurried Emma toward the store exit, leaving their shopping cart abandoned in the aisle. Emma kept looking back, her face streaked with tears, until they disappeared through the automatic doors. The store seemed eerily quiet after they left. Marcus realized his hands were shaking as he picked up a box of cereal that had fallen during the commotion. She had gotten an A in math. She could ride her bike now. He had missed it all. That night, after his shift ended, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table and began to write. Not just one letter, but many, to Sarah's lawyer, to the court, to the family services office. Each letter told the same story, a father's simple wish to hug his daughter, to hear about her day, to be part of her life again. I'm not asking for full custody, he wrote. I just want to see my daughter. Please, just give me a chance to show you I can be the father she deserves. As he sealed the last envelope, Marcus touched the spot on his uniform where Emma's favorite cereal box had pressed against it earlier. For the first time in months, he felt something new stirring in his heart. Not just hope, but determination. His daughter still loved him, still wanted him in her life. That was worth fighting for. The Advocate. Every Wednesday evening, Marcus Thompson attended the mandatory parenting classes at the Pine Street Community Center. The classes were part of the court's requirements if he ever wanted to regain visitation rights with Emma. Tonight, the ancient radiator clanked and hissed as he sat in the back row, taking careful notes even though his hand ached from his earlier shift at the grocery store. The classroom was half empty, just like always. A few other parents sat scattered around, some looking bored, others as desperate as Marcus felt. The instructor, Mrs. Rivera, was explaining something about positive discipline techniques, but Marcus's mind kept drifting back to seeing Emma at the store 3 days ago. After class ended, Marcus stayed behind to help stack the chairs, something his physical therapist would probably scold him for. His leg protested, but he needed to keep busy. The quiet of his empty apartment waited at home, along with a stack of unanswered letters to Sarah's lawyer. You're here every week, a voice said behind him. Marcus turned to find a young Asian man in a neat blue suit watching him. I've noticed you always take notes. Most people just play on their phones. I can't afford to miss anything, Marcus replied, setting down the chair he was holding. Every detail might help me see my daughter again. The man stepped forward, extending his hand. I'm James Chen. I volunteer with the center's legal aid office. His handshake was firm but friendly. Would you like a cup of coffee? The vending machine here makes terrible coffee, but it's hot at least. 10 minutes later, they sat in the small break room, Marcus telling his story over styrofoam cups of truly awful coffee. He showed James the letters he'd written, explained about his workplace injury, about Sarah's new husband, about seeing Emma at the grocery store. James listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. His eyes narrowed when Marcus mentioned his original lawyer's name. Wait, Jerry Summers represented you in a custody case. Marcus nodded. He was all I could afford. Why? Because Jerry Summers specializes in real estate law. He hasn't handled a family court case in years. James pulled out a small notebook and began writing. And you said your injury is improving. Do you have recent medical records? Yes, my physical therapist says I'm ahead of schedule, but Sarah's lawyer won't even look at the reports. Marcus stared into his coffee cup. I send them everything, but nothing changes. James was quiet for a moment, tapping his pen against his notebook. Marcus, would you be willing to let me review your case? Pro bono, that means no charge, he added quickly, seeing Marcus's worried expression. Something doesn't add up here. Hope flickered in Marcus's chest, but he'd learned to be cautious. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because I've watched you for 6 weeks, James replied. You show up early to every class. You take notes. You help clean up. You work 2 jobs while doing physical therapy. That tells me more about your character than any court document. Marcus felt tears threatening to form, but he held them back. I just want to see my daughter again, even if it's just for an hour, even if someone has to watch us the whole time. I just need her to know I haven't abandoned her. James started writing again, his pen moving quickly across the paper. Bring me everything you have, court documents, medical records, correspondence with Sarah's lawyer, everything. I'll review it this weekend. I can't pay you, Marcus said quietly. I'm saving every extra dollar for court fees, but it's slow. I told you, pro bono. James interrupted with a kind smile. I became a lawyer to help people, not to get rich. Though I won't say no if you want to bring me a coffee that doesn't taste like warm dirt. For the first time in months, Marcus felt a real smile spread across his face. Deal. But first, would you mind looking at something? He pulled out his phone, opening the new email he'd written to Sarah's lawyer. I've been trying to find the right words. James took the phone, reading carefully. It's a good start, he said finally, but maybe we can make it better. Tell me, Marcus, what exactly would you say to Emma if you could see her right now? As the old radiator continued its noisy complaints, Marcus began to talk, and James wrote everything down, occasionally nodding and asking questions. Outside the community center's windows, the sun had set, but inside, a small flame of hope began to burn brighter. The truth emerges. James Chen's small office at the Legal Aid Center was cramped with boxes of documents. After 2 weeks of investigation, papers covered every surface: medical records, court transcripts, and employment files. Marcus sat in the worn chair across from James's desk, watching nervously as the young lawyer paced the room. Something's not right here, James said, picking up a document. Your original lawyer, Jerry Summers, filed all the wrong motions. It's like he was trying to lose your case. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. And look at this. Your medical records from the hospital show excellent progress, but the court never saw these reports. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. What do you mean? The court received different medical reports. James explained, spreading out 2 papers side by side. See these dates? They're the same, but the information is completely different. Someone altered your recovery timeline to make it look much worse than it actually was. A knock at the door interrupted them. James' assistant Jenny entered, carrying a thick folder. I found it, she said, excitement in her voice. Robert Maxwell's connection to the courthouse. Marcus frowned. Sarah's new husband? What about him? James took the folder, scanning its contents quickly. His eyes widened. Robert Maxwell isn't just a real estate developer. He's on the board of trustees for the county court system, and look at this, he went to law school with Jerry Summers. I don't understand, Marcus said, his voice quiet. What does this mean? James sat down heavily in his chair. It means your case was rigged from the start. Maxwell used his connections to make sure you got Summers as your lawyer, a real estate attorney who had no business handling a custody case. Then someone doctored your medical records to make you look unfit as a father. Marcus felt his hands begin to shake. All those months of blame, of thinking he hadn't tried hard enough, of believing he had somehow failed as a father, it had all been orchestrated against him. But why, he asked. Why would he do this? Control, James replied grimly. Maxwell's firm is trying to buy up property in your old neighborhood. Having custody of Emma gives Sarah incentive to do what he wants, including selling your old house, the one you and Sarah owned together. Marcus remembered how quickly Sarah had agreed to sell their family home after marrying Robert. She'd said they needed a fresh start, but now everything was taking on a different meaning. We need to move fast, James said, reaching for his phone. I have a friend at the district attorney's office. This kind of manipulation of the court system is serious business. He paused, looking at Marcus. But first, we need to talk to your boss at the grocery store. Mr. Johnson? Why? Because. James smiled. He's been keeping a log of every hour you've worked, every time you've stayed late, every customer comment about your service. He called me yesterday, said he's been worried about you and wanted to help. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes. All this time, people had been watching, caring, gathering evidence to help him fight back. James's phone buzzed with a text. His expression grew serious as he read it. There's more. The school counselor at Emma's school just reached out. Emma's been having trouble sleeping, her grades are dropping, and she keeps drawing pictures of you in art class. The counselor's concerned about the emotional impact of cutting off contact with you. Marcus stood up suddenly, his leg barely hurting now. We have to help her. Please, James, tell me we can fix this. James gathered the papers into neat piles. We can do more than fix it. We can make sure Maxwell never does this to another family. He handed Marcus a document. This is an emergency petition for an immediate hearing. With the evidence we have now, no judge can ignore this. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of hope. Marcus looked at the picture of Emma on his phone, the one from the day he lost custody. Soon, he promised silently. Soon, Princess, we'll make this right. One more thing, James said, pulling out a final document. Mr. Johnson's sister works at the courthouse. She remembered something interesting about the day of your custody hearing. Guess who was seen talking to the judge in his chambers before the case? Robert Maxwell himself. Marcus felt a strange mix of anger and relief wash over him. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the path back to his daughter was becoming clear. The breaking point. Miss Thompson, Emma's third-grade teacher, noticed something was wrong during morning art class. While other children drew bright pictures of their families on vacation, Emma sat quietly in the corner, her paper filled with darker colors. The drawing showed a little girl standing between two houses, tears falling from her eyes. Emma, sweetie, do you want to tell me about your picture? Miss Thompson asked gently, kneeling beside Emma's desk. Emma didn't look up, her small hand still moving the black crayon across the paper. This is me, she whispered. That's Mommy's new house, and that's where Daddy used to live with me. She pointed to each house with her crayon. I dream about Daddy's house a lot. During recess, Emma didn't join the other children on the playground. Instead, she sat on a bench near the fence, clutching her backpack. Inside was a wrinkled photo of her father that she had managed to hide when her stepfather, Robert, had taken down all the other pictures of Marcus from their new house. Mrs. Martinez, the school counselor, watched Emma through her office window. This was the third time this week she'd seen the usually cheerful girl sitting alone. Making a decision, she walked outside and sat beside Emma on the bench. That's a special photo you're holding, Mrs. Martinez said softly. Would you like to tell me about it? Emma's fingers tightened around the picture. It's my daddy, she said. Mommy says I'm not supposed to talk about him anymore, but her lower lip trembled. I saw him at the store last week. He looked so sad. Back in her office, Mrs. Martinez made careful notes about their conversation. Emma's withdrawal from friends, her declining grades, her constant drawings of her father. It all painted a concerning picture. As the school counselor for 15 years, she had seen the impact of custody battles before, but something about this case felt different. That afternoon, during math class, everything came to a head. The students were working on word problems when Emma suddenly burst into tears. The problem had been about a father and daughter buying ice cream, a simple question about counting change that triggered a flood of memories. I want my daddy. Emma sobbed, her words echoing through the stunned classroom. He always helped me with math. He made it fun. Why can't I see him anymore? Miss Thompson quickly led the crying child to Mrs. Martinez's office while another teacher calmed the remaining students. In the counselor's office, Emma's tears wouldn't stop. He promised he'd never leave me, Emma hiccoughed between sobs. But Robert says Daddy doesn't want me anymore. That's not true. I saw him at the store. He still loves me. Mrs. Martinez felt her professional concern deepening. Emma, has Robert said other things about your daddy? Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. He says Daddy is bad now, that he's sick and can't take care of me, but that's not true. Daddy was getting better. His leg didn't hurt as much. He showed me his exercises. The counselor made more notes, her pen moving quickly across the paper. Something wasn't adding up. She had seen Marcus at parent-teacher conferences before the custody change. He had never missed one, even with his injury. He had always been engaged, concerned, and clearly devoted to his daughter. After school, Mrs. Martinez made 2 important phone calls. The first was to the family court services, expressing her professional concerns about Emma's emotional state. The second was to a friend at the Legal Aid Center, James Chen. The child is showing signs of significant emotional distress, she explained to James. The sudden cutoff from her father appears to be causing real psychological harm. And there's something else. Some of the things her stepfather has been telling her don't match what I observed of Mr. Thompson before the custody change. That evening, as Sarah picked up a still tearful Emma from school, Mrs. Martinez watched them leave. She had already emailed her complete report to the court. 20 pages documenting Emma's declining emotional state, her withdrawal from friends, and most importantly, the inconsistencies in Robert Maxwell's claims about Marcus. The truth was unraveling, one thread at a time, and at its center was a little girl who just wanted her father back. The reconciliation. The courthouse hallway was quiet except for the sound of footsteps on marble floors. Marcus sat on a wooden bench, his hands clasped tightly together, while James Chen arranged papers beside him. Today's emergency hearing had been scheduled after Mrs. Martinez's report reached Judge Wilson, along with the evidence of Robert Maxwell's interference. Sarah sat on the opposite side of the hallway, but something was different today. She kept glancing at Robert with uncertainty in her eyes. The confident businessman who had convinced her to cut Marcus out of Emma's life now looked nervous, constantly checking his phone and whispering to his lawyer. The judge will speak to Emma first, James explained quietly to Marcus. She'll be in the judge's chambers, away from everyone. That way she can speak freely without feeling pressured. Marcus nodded, watching as Mrs. Martinez led Emma down the hallway. His daughter wore a blue dress with white flowers, her hair in 2 neat braids. She looked so small walking into the judge's chambers, but her steps were determined. Inside the judge's office, Emma sat in a large leather chair, her feet barely touching the ground. Judge Wilson, a grandmother with kind eyes and silver hair, sat not behind her desk, but in a chair next to Emma. "Emma," the judge said gently, "I'd like you to tell me how you're feeling. There are no wrong answers here. This is just between us." Emma looked at the family photo on the judge's desk. "Is that your granddaughter?" "Yes, she's about your age." "Does she get to see her daddy whenever she wants?" The judge's expression softened. "Yes, she does. Would you like to tell me about your daddy?" The words began to pour out of Emma, like a dam breaking. She told the judge about how her father had taught her to ride a bike, even when his leg was hurting, how he never missed her school events, how he made silly voices when reading bedtime stories. "And now?" Judge Wilson asked. "Now I cry a lot," Emma said quietly. "Robert says Daddy is bad and sick, but that's not true. I saw him at the store. He was working and walking better. He looked so sad." She pulled the crumpled photo from her pocket. "I hide this so Robert won't take it away like the other pictures." Outside in the hallway, an hour passed. Marcus kept his eyes fixed on the chamber doors. Finally, they opened, and Emma emerged with Mrs. Martinez. Her eyes were red from crying, but she stood straighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Judge Wilson followed, her face stern. "We'll reconvene in my courtroom immediately." What happened next moved quickly. The judge presented the evidence James had gathered, the manipulated medical records, Jerry Summers' connection to Robert Maxwell, the documented meeting between Maxwell and the judge who had originally ruled against Marcus. "The level of manipulation in this case is unprecedented," Judge Wilson declared, her voice sharp. "Mr. Maxwell, your interference with the court system will be referred to the district attorney's office." Sarah had gone pale, staring at her husband in disbelief. All his careful lies were crumbling. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "based on the evidence and Emma's own testimony, I am ordering immediate supervised visitation between Emma and her father to begin today." Marcus felt his heart stop. "Today? Daddy!" Emma's voice rang out as she broke away from Mrs. Martinez, running across the courtroom. Marcus caught her in his arms, tears flowing freely down his face as he held his daughter for the first time in months. "I knew you didn't forget me," Emma whispered against his shoulder. "I knew you still loved me." Sarah watched them, tears in her own eyes as she finally saw the truth. Her husband's manipulation had nearly destroyed her daughter's happiness. She stood up, walking slowly toward Marcus and Emma. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I should have seen what was happening." Judge Wilson's gavel struck once more. "We'll reconvene tomorrow to establish a permanent visitation schedule. For now, Mr. Thompson, you may take your daughter to the Courthouse Cafe for ice cream. Mrs. Martinez will accompany you." As Marcus carried Emma out of the courtroom, her arms tight around his neck, he caught James's eye. The young lawyer smiled and gave him a thumbs up. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, as if celebrating with them. "Can we get chocolate ice cream?" Emma asked, her voice happy for the first time in months. "Any flavor you want, Princess," Marcus replied, his heart fuller than he could ever remember. "Any flavor you want, a new beginning." 3 months after the emergency hearing, Marcus Thompson sat in the auditorium of Emma's elementary school, his heart swelling with pride. The annual spring play was about to begin, and Emma had been chosen to play the lead role of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. His leg barely bothered him anymore as he shifted in his seat, checking the program in his hands for the 100th time. There was Emma's name, printed in bold letters. He had already taken a photo of it to show his coworkers at Johnson's grocery store, where he had recently been promoted to assistant manager. A movement caught his eye as Sarah entered the auditorium, looking around uncertainly. Marcus raised his hand, gesturing to the empty seat he had saved beside him. After Robert's arrest for interfering with the court system, Sarah had filed for divorce and begun the slow process of rebuilding trust with Marcus for Emma's sake. "Is she nervous?" Sarah whispered as she sat down. Marcus smiled. "A little, but she's been practicing her lines every day during our visits. She's going to be amazing." The new custody arrangement had been working well. Marcus had Emma every weekend and 2 evenings during the week. They had fallen back into their old routines. Homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories, and Sunday morning pancakes. His apartment now had a second bedroom, decorated exactly as Emma had wanted, with star stickers on the ceiling and purple curtains at the windows. The lights dimmed, and the audience fell quiet. Behind the curtain, they could hear the shuffle of small feet and excited whispers. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as the curtain rose and Emma stepped onto the stage in her blue and white check dress, her hair in perfect Dorothy braids. "Auntie Em, Auntie Em." Emma's clear voice rang out across the auditorium. Marcus and Sarah exchanged proud glances. Their daughter was a natural. In the third row, James Chen sat with his wife, having accepted Marcus's invitation to the play. The young lawyer had become more than just a legal advocate. He was now a friend. After Robert's arrest, James had helped other families affected by similar corruption, earning a reputation as a defender of parental rights. As Emma danced and sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," Marcus remembered their first reunion in the Courthouse Cafe 3 months ago. They had sat there for hours, Emma telling him about everything he had missed while they shared the biggest ice cream sundae the cafe could make. During intermission, Mrs. Martinez stopped by their seats. "Emma's been like a different child these past months," she said warmly. "Her grades are back up, she's making friends again, and those sad drawings have been replaced by happy ones." The second act began, and Marcus watched as Emma skipped down the yellow brick road with her new friends. She had faced her own journey, just like Dorothy, and found her way back home, not to a single home, but to 2 homes where she was loved and cherished. When the play ended, Emma received a standing ovation. Marcus and Sarah stood side by side, clapping until their hands hurt. After the curtain call, Emma ran down from the stage, still in her Dorothy costume, and threw herself into Marcus's arms. "Did you see me, Daddy? Did you hear my songs?" "Every word, Princess," Marcus said, hugging her tight. "You were perfect." Sarah stepped forward with a bouquet of flowers. "Your daddy's right, sweetheart. You were wonderful." Later that evening, as Marcus tucked Emma into bed at his apartment, it was his weekend with her, she asked a question that made his heart melt. "Daddy, are you happy now?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Very happy, Princess. Are you?" Emma nodded sleepily. I like having two homes better than having no daddy, she yawned. Can we have chocolate chip pancakes tomorrow? Of course we can. Marcus kissed her forehead and turned on her star-shaped nightlight. Sweet dreams, my little Dorothy. Standing in the doorway, watching his daughter drift off to sleep, Marcus felt complete. The long journey home hadn't been easy, but like Dorothy in Emma's play, they had discovered that love and truth could overcome any obstacle. His daughter was back in his life, and this time, nothing would ever tear them apart again.